Should you get Apple's new M2 MacBook Air, or should you get the 14-inch MacBook Pro? Today we're going to be comparing these laptops and see which MacBook is right for you. Hey guys, Imran here. Welcome to the channel. I've been testing the M2 MacBook Air for the last couple weeks alongside my 14-inch MacBook Pro and wanted to share my experience with these. I've gotten lots of questions about which MacBook should I get a MacBook Air or a MacBook Pro, and I hope this video helps you in making your decision. We're going to start by looking at the design and feature differences between these, and then get into the real-world performance and how I use them. Starting with design, both of these laptops have excellent build quality as we've come to expect from Apple's laptops. These have a very similar design, with the Air of course having a thinner profile. Both laptops feel incredibly solid, and as I've stated in my previous videos, I love the design of these laptops. The Air is a fair bit thinner, and it weighs 2.7 pounds, versus the MacBook Pro coming in at 3.5 pounds. Both laptops have a pretty similar footprint, and as you can see, the MacBook Pro is slightly larger. In terms of portability, the weight is by far the biggest difference here. I do find the 14-inch MacBook Pro to be a pretty portable laptop, but if I had to choose one to carry around, I would of course love to be carrying around the MacBook Air. Let's look at the keyboard. So the keyboards are slightly different in appearance. The Pro has a blacked out keyboard, where the Air has the aluminum frame visible between the keys. And in terms of features, both of these are the same. They both have backlit keyboards, Touch ID, and are a great experience to type on. I really have no complaints with either of these keyboards. For the FaceTime camera, both of these have the same 1080p webcam, and it's definitely good enough for regular video calls. It's definitely nothing exceptional, and it's not going to stand out at all. Definitely not as good as an external high-quality webcam. Looking at the displays of these laptops, the Air has a 13.6-inch screen, and the Pro has a 14.1-inch ProMotion display. And looking at them side by side, you can definitely tell that the MacBook Pro has a nicer display. The fact that it's larger definitely helps. So if I had to pick a display here, I'm definitely going with the 14-inch MacBook Pro. Looking at the speakers, the MacBook Air speakers are actually in front of the keyboard, pointed towards the display, and they sound pretty good, definitely improved over the previous generation MacBook Air, but definitely nowhere near as good as the speakers on the MacBook Pro. You just get much fuller, crisper, bassier sound from the MacBook Pro, and if you use your speakers a lot on a laptop, you'll likely appreciate the sound from the MacBook Pro here. For the MacBook Air, we get MagSafe, 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports, a headphone jack. With the Pro, you get 3 Thunderbolt 4 ports, an SD card slot, an HDMI port, MagSafe, and a headphone jack. If you do use things like an SD card or HDMI occasionally, it's definitely nice to have those ports built into the laptop. I know for myself, I definitely love having the SD card slot on a laptop. All right, let's talk about performance. I've seen a lot of talk online of the M2 MacBook Air overheating or having slow SSD issues, and obviously I wanted to test this out for myself and see how it affects my actual experience with the laptop. I'm testing this with the base model MacBook Air with 8 gigs of RAM and 256 gig SSD. I don't really care too much about benchmarks. I really just like to see how a laptop performs in the tasks that I'm actually going to be using it for. The tasks I do are web browsing, email, streaming videos like YouTube or sports or online courses. I use some software development tools, which I use for work. Photography is a hobby of mine, so I use Adobe Lightroom and Photoshop fairly often, at least a few times a week. I edit videos in Final Cut Pro for YouTube or other social media platforms. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And I use Logic Pro for audio correction and enhancements as well. I mainly work with 1080p footage, sometimes 4K, from a Canon mirrorless camera or an iPhone. I'm happy to report that the Air handled my tasks surprisingly well, and the only issue I had with it was that I just didn't have enough RAM to have all my apps open at once because it only had 8 gigs of RAM. But if I didn't have all those apps open all the time, I was able to edit video, edit photos, and do all my usual tasks all hooked up to my 5K external display, and it all ran fine. I had no overheating issues. I didn't experience any kind of slowness. I did find 8 gigs of RAM not to be enough, since I like to have a lot of apps open simultaneously when I'm working, and 256 gigs is just not enough space if you plan to edit videos on a laptop. The MacBook Pro I have is an M1 Pro with 16 gigs of RAM and a 1 terabyte SSD. and I've had no issues with that laptop, primarily because I have enough RAM and storage. For additional context, I have an M1 Mac Mini with the same specs, 16 gigs of RAM, 1TB SSD, and that's also handled all my tasks fine. I can confidently say that a similarly spec'd out Air with, say, a terabyte SSD and 16 gigs of RAM would handle all my tasks fine, and I would have no issues carrying that around as my main laptop. So who should get the MacBook Air? If you're looking for the lightest and thinnest laptop, and maybe your tasks are somewhat similar to what I mentioned earlier, the Air is more than capable and can handle a variety of tasks. The MacBook Air really has some incredible capability in a really thin and light machine. My recommendation is to spec up the Air to 16 gigs of RAM and either a 512 or 1TB SSD, really depending on your needs. You can get away with 256 if you just know that you're not going to have that much stored on the laptop. If you plan to edit video on the Air, you'll definitely want to get a terabyte or more, especially if you're dealing with 4K footage, which tends to be extremely large. What's really amazing with computers like the MacBook Air and the Mac Mini is these are technically Apple's entry-level computers, and they perform so well for all the tasks that I need. So what would make you choose a MacBook Pro over the Air? You do get a more powerful processor. So if you're running more demanding tasks like 3D modeling, rendering, or make a living editing photos and videos all the time, you're definitely going to want to choose the MacBook Pro in that case. If you need support for multiple displays, the M2 chip doesn't support that, and you'll have to get a MacBook Pro in that case. For me, I love the Air form factor. It's wonderfully thin and light, and I wish it was the one I was carrying around all the time. But the big things that push me into the Pro are support for multiple displays. I do have a setup at home that I connect to. I also love having an SD card slot on my laptop when I go on vacation or go on trips. I do like to take my camera, and I'll often plug in an SD card, and not having to carry around an adapter is nice. I like having the slightly larger screen, though it's not like critical for me. And I think the Pro gives me a little more headroom as I make my way into hopefully making more videos for you guys. And at the end of the day, the 14-inch Pro is still a pretty portable laptop. Everyone's use case here is slightly different, and you might be a simple user but like having a larger screen. Both these laptops are fantastic and extremely capable. There has never been a better lineup of laptops from Apple, and remember, these are just tools to help you get your work done or create something or play or whatever it is you want to do. You have to decide what's best for you, and I hope this video helps you in making a decision. That's all for today, guys. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll catch you guys next time.